This video is brought to you by Neighbour. Albanian Prime Minister Edi Rama likes to compare his country to a jilted lover when it comes to EU negotiations. According to Rama, Albania is waiting at the altar, ready to marry into the bloc. But the EU hasn't shown up to the proverbial church, and accession negotiations have proceeded at a snail's pace since they were first opened in 2009. However, later this month, Albania will finally open so-called chapter negotiations with the EU, having decoupled its bid from that of North Macedonia a few weeks ago. Currently, only Serbia and Montenegro have got to this stage in negotiations, and while this process takes a really long time, the country now looks like a potential frontrunner. So in this video, we're going to have a look at how Albania has managed to get this far, which recent developments have springboarded its bid, and whether Albania actually could become the EU's 28th member state. Before we start, if you haven't already, please consider subscribing and ringing the bell to stay in the loop and be notified when we release new videos. So let's start with some context. For most of the 20th century, Albania was ruled by a brutal communist dictatorship, led by Enver Hoxha, who was basically more Stalinist than Stalin. In the late 60s, Albania, which had become quite economically dependent on Moscow, fell out with the Soviet Union and withdrew from the Warsaw Pact. Tirana then turned to China, becoming the CCP's most devoted European ally. Then, while other Eastern European communist countries started to open up economically and become more liberal, Hoxha continued his Stalinist policies, and then fell out with Beijing, leaving Albania completely isolated. No one could cross the Albanian border without an official license by the state, and almost all international trade was banned. Albania essentially became the Balkan version of North Korea, and with no allies, a waning economy, and widespread repression, the state eventually started to break down. Hoxha was finally succeeded by Ramiz Alia, who oversaw the fall of communism in Albania, and began slowly opening the country up to the rest of the world. Emerging from decades of isolation, Albania turned westward, and has since been considered the most pro-EU country in the region. Over 95% of its population support integration, which is the highest rate among all the other Western Balkan countries. This enthusiasm is matched by a clear cross-party consensus on EU membership, and there isn't really a plan B if it doesn't work out. Albania submitted its formal application in 2009 and was granted membership status 5 years later under the leadership of Prime Minister Edi Rama. Unfortunately for Albania, negotiations have been slow, and several member states, notably France and the Netherlands, have blocked advancing negotiations multiple times. Now, this is partly because states like France worry that the EU simply doesn't have the bandwidth to admit new members, but it's also because many member states weren't happy with Albania's corruption and crime problems. For context, Albania ranks as the highest risk European country for money laundering, consistently features among the top 10 for human trafficking, and has a massive drug problem, with marijuana trafficking alone estimated to be worth an insane 26% of Albania's entire GDP. Furthermore, Albania's membership has been hurt by the fact that the EU linked its bid to North Macedonia's. While North Macedonia originally made quick progress, a dispute with Bulgaria over minority rights resulted in a veto that stalled both bids. However, in 2022, two breakthroughs reignited Albania's membership bid. North Macedonia resolved its dispute with Bulgaria, and Russia's invasion of Ukraine inspired a new sense of urgency in the EU about deterring Russian influence in Europe, and so negotiations were reopened. Unfortunately for Albania, in May of this year, the right-wing coalition won North Macedonia's elections, and their nationalist rhetoric has hurt relations with both Bulgaria and Greece, making North Macedonia's accession increasingly unlikely. This looked like bad news for Albania, but in September the EU agreed to decouple Albania's bid from North Macedonia, paving the way for chapter negotiations. What's more, the EU's ambassador said that the combination of political will and administrative capacity gives the potential to become an EU frontrunner. Now, this isn't a total surprise, given that Albania and the EU have been growing even closer for at least the past few years, for at least 3 reasons. First, as Europe grapples with its migration crisis, Albania has emerged as a key partner. Described by Rama as an act of solidarity with the EU, Albania is set to become the first non-EU country to process asylum seeker applications on behalf of an EU member state. Italian authorities will intercept and take migrants trying to cross the Mediterranean to detention centres in Albania, where they'll have their asylum claims processed. Maloney claims that these centres will be able to handle 36,000 asylum seekers a year, and after signing the deal with Rama, she said Albania, quote, behaves as if it's one of the EU's member states, and is not only a friend of Italy, but is also a friend of the European Union. Rama used similar rhetoric, emphasising that, in signing this deal, Albania is, quote, choosing to act like an EU member state and agreeing to share a burden that Europe should face united. Other countries in the bloc have also expressed interest in doing similar deals with Albania. Evidently, in taking in Italy's asylum seekers, Rama is hoping to put Albania in the EU's good books and prove that Albania is an important partner to the EU. And if goodwill isn't enough to get them into the club, these deals also give aspiring states leverage by making the EU reliant on them for dealing with the politically contentious issue of migration. Another reason why EU-Albania relations have improved is that Edi Rama has been pretty good at helping maintain stability in the Western Balkans, which became a priority for the bloc after Russia's invasion of Ukraine. As a strong believer in Balkan integration, Rama has been at the helm of the Berlin process, which aims to revitalise ties between Western Balkan countries and the EU. Accordingly, he's mediated negotiations between the Albanian-majority Kosovo and Serbia, and initiated the creation of basically a mini Balkan Schengen. Finally, Albania's foreign policy is aligned a lot more closely with the EU than the two other frontrunners. Until recently, Montenegro seemed to be on a clear pro-European path, but its current governing coalition now includes the leaders of parties with pro-Russian sentiments, who reject EU integration and who got into a spat with Croatia this summer that very nearly led to a veto on their bid. Similarly, Serbia's President Aleksandar Vučić indulges in East-West balancing act, pursuing deep relations with China and Russia at the same time as the EU. Albania, on the other hand, has made it very clear that they have eyes for the EU, and this March they even rebuilt a Soviet-era airbase to serve NATO aircraft, saying that the base will increase the security of the Western Balkans, that's, quote, endangered from the threat and neo-imperialist ambitions of Russia. Now, it's important not to get ahead of ourselves here. There's still a long way to go before membership, and Tirana still has to sort out its corruption problem. Nonetheless, Albania is making progress, and now plausibly the frontrunner for the EU's next member state. Now, it seems that things between Albania and the European Union won't be resolved for a while, but one thing that does appear to be approaching at an alarmingly fast pace is the US election, and that's what our new Nebula original series, WTF USA, is all about.
WTF USA is our slightly tongue-in-cheek look at the US election. Each week, we dive into the online discourse, explain the politics behind the stories, and tell you if you really need to pay attention. For example, in recent episodes, we've talked about Trump's foray into the world of crypto, claims of dog eating, and AI-generated Musk memes. These might sound stupid, but they actually tell us a lot about the candidate's economic plans, the state of post-truth politics, and how the US feels about its deficit. That is to say, WTF USA brings you the wildest moments from the 2024 election, tells you the hidden political meaning behind each of them, and then if you can just ignore the chaos, or if you should follow along. New videos come out every Friday only on Nebula. That's the streaming service we've built alongside a bunch of our creator friends, and where you can find all kinds of superb content like WTF. We're super proud of WTF USA, and we hope that with your support, we'll be able to make other interesting, weird, and entertaining series with Nebula in the future. So signing up genuinely helps TLDR to grow and expand. As I say, it's not just WTF either. There's a whole bunch of other original content on the service, from creators like Real Life Law, Wendover Productions, and Neo. You can also watch every normal TLDR video ad-free on Nebula as well, and in some instances, before they land on YouTube. If you're not a member already, click the link in the description to get 40% off. That's just $30 for a year, or $2.50 a month. We really hope you check out the series, and as always, thanks for your support.